after, or there might be questions that might not be fully clarified. If so, feel free to come to our office and we can do a first free consult for you guys. There's also some deals that we would like to discuss, and I suppose Surya and Russell will go through it, which is a special for JCU students, depending on what applications you might want to lodge in the recent future. So to very firstly begin with, we will, as I said, be talking about the SS. We will firstly be talking about the SSVF, the new student visa that's coming middle of last year. We'll be talking about what they're looking at when they're approving student visas, if it's for yourself here in Australia or it's for anyone that's coming in from overseas to study potentially, friends, family, etc. Then the post-study work visa and the residency options. So to begin with is the student visa. So the SSVF framework, or the Simplified Student Visa Framework, came into effect on the 1st of July 2016, which was last year. And that brought with it a few changes to the student visa side of things. One of those things was that the subclass that was before 573 and 572, depending on what level of study you guys wanted to do, was now changed to one cumulative subclass of 500 with different streams depending on what level of study you wanted to do. So if it's a master's, a bachelor's, or anything lower than that. So the overview of these changes you'll find here. So all applications are now online. So there were certain situations and circumstances under which certain applications were made that were not online, so they're all going to be online now. There's two main subclasses, like I mentioned before. The subclasses that were available before, which is 573 and 572, respectively, are no longer there. We've got the subclass 500 and we've got the subclass 590. Also, one of the attempts that they were making, and they're still trying to get there, is to try and process as many student visas as possible. So their aim was 75% to be finalized within the month. However, we do see that certain applications do take longer than that, but I'm sure they're working on sort of getting to that place. One of the main things that they do look at when doing student visa applications, or approving or refusing them for that matter, they would be looking at immigration history, ties to their home country, and conditions that might encourage a student to remain in Australia after they've completed the course. Now, these are three elements of the one thing that they look at, which is the GTE criteria. The GTE criteria is the genuine temporary entry criteria, which essentially tells your case officer, or that's what they use, to see whether they would see the potential applicant as somebody that is genuinely wanting to stay in Australia to study, or are they trying to study in order to simply remain in Australia? And that's one of the things they do look at. Moving forwards, obviously one of the major changes with the student visa application was that evidence of funds and English would be required. So a lot of times in the past, if you had to do an application, you might have lodged your application and waited for the case officer to come back and ask you for funds. Or sometimes, in certain instances, they might not ask you for funds and they might still grant the visa. Now it's pretty much necessary that you do show funds, so they're very, very particular about that. So whenever you're lodging a student visa, we will normally tell our clients about how much they need to show based on how much they have to study, what course they're studying, and what their COE says. But it's become mandatory now that you do pay attention to the fund side of things more than anything else. All 500 subclasses basically must be enrolled in a full-time course for international students. The students must ensure that they continue to achieve a satisfactory progression. So if you constantly fail, that can be looked at as something negative based on the fact that you're not actually progressing as quickly or as you should in a course. Now, moving forwards, if a student is looking to downgrade their course, then they need to make sure that they are on the right visa. Because before, I'll give you an example, if you came in to study a master's program and you were on a 573 visa and you decided for whatever reason that you wanted to study something that was a bachelor level course, being on a 573 visa allowed you to study bachelor's or master's level courses. However, with the 500 subclass, it's specific to the level of study that you are granted the visa for. So for example, if you got the visa to study an MBA program, and you decide then to downgrade yourself and go and study a bachelor's of IT, for example, then you would need to lodge a new visa for the bachelor's level and be able to then go on and study. If you don't do so or you fail to do so, you may be breaching your visa conditions, which has been granted only for a master's program and not for anything lower. Yeah, make sure that you're studying a course that's actually on the correct level and is a registered course for international students. Now, being on a student visa, normally if you're looking at options after the completion of your course, normally the first and most viable option is the 485 visa, which a lot of you might know as temporary residency. Some of you may call it post-study work visa, graduate skilled visa, and so forth. The 485 is basically something that's available to students, to eligible applicants and students, after the completion of their qualifications here in Australia. Now, the 485 visa, also known as temporary residency, gives you between 18 months to 2 years to live and work in Australia based on the qualifications that you've completed. Now, how many of you, you can show, raise your hands if you are students who have come in to study on a student visa after November 2011. So you've started 2012 and after. Most of you have started. Anyone that's actually been here longer or before 2012, you've still been in Australia since 2011? Anyone in the room that's been on a student visa since then? All right, okay, fantastic. So everyone's coming after 2012. So basically, the general rule is that if you applied for your first student visa after 5th of November 2011, which is essentially all of you, you're eligible to apply for the post-study work visa, which is a 2-year work visa upon completion of your master's or bachelor's program. Okay? Now, basically, in order to be able to apply for this, you need to have completed a course that meets the requirements so you'll be able to apply for this occupation. Now, the bachelor's and master's programs, normally, if you have completed after coming in, if you come in after 2012, excuse me, you would be able to apply for this visa. There are certain requirements that you do need to meet, which we'll discuss in the future slides. But I do need to clarify, although all of you have come in after 2012 and you're probably going to be under the second stream, the post-study work stream, there are certain students or applicants that might be your friends, family, etc., that might have come in before that. And if they have been here for a very long time, they've been studying various different courses and they're about to finish a bachelor's or master's, if you have applied for your first student visa before 5th of November 2011, it's a very important day, then you would not be eligible to apply for the post-study work visa. However, certain courses and certain programs might make them eligible to apply for the graduate stream. The graduate stream is the older TR, which is an 18-month visa. It has a few more requirements than the normal post-study work visa and gives you 6 months less on the TR. But that may be eligible to certain applicants, mostly if you have completed a course that is on the permanent residency list. So for example, if you've come in before 2011 and you just completed a bachelor's of accounting, or you've completed an MIT MBA or an MPA MBA, then you may still be eligible for this one, but we normally would have to look at your individual circumstances when you came in, what you've completed before we can guarantee that you are eligible for that stream. Very important though is that you apply for the right stream, because applying for the wrong stream could potentially mean that you will not be able to get a visa or you may be refused. Now, so moving forward, the eligibility criteria for these visas, depending on when you came in, when you finished your course, you may be eligible for one stream or the other, but there are certain requirements that you do need to meet. There's age, there's an eligible visa requirement, English language requirement, which is 6 overall in your IELTS and nothing less than 5, which is the minimum score you need to have. Completed your Australian study requirement within the prescribed time, so you need to have completed at least 92 weeks of study in a registered course for international students, and the course must be at least 16 calendar months. And of course, you will need to meet health and character requirements that the department has set out for anyone that needs a temporary visa to make sure that there isn't anything wrong in terms of your police clearances or any health requirements that you need to meet. Should you meet all of these things normally, there will be an opportunity to get your 485 visa. Depending on when you've come in, of course, you'll be either in the 18-month category or you'll be in the 2 years category. Okay, so the Australian study requirement, I'll just go through this really quickly. So all your international courses are registered under CRI course. So if you all have your COEs, you'll see a certain CRI course code on your COE. So depending on which course you're doing, they're registered for a certain amount of weeks. And 92 weeks is the magic number. So as long as your course is longer than 92 weeks, you should normally be able to apply for your TR. However, credits and exemptions that you may take from previous studies will affect the amount of weeks of a course, even if you have completed a course that says 92 weeks, but you've taken a lot of exemptions because you might have studied a similar course overseas or something along those lines, then that might affect those weeks. So that's something we do help a lot of our clients check before we actually go ahead and apply for their application. Health and character checks, as I mentioned, you do need to meet the requirements that the department has set out for these things in order to be approved for the visa. Okay, what is the difference? Major differences between these two streams. This is to just summarize this part. We'll be moving on to the permanent residency after this. The graduate skilled visa is for 18 months as opposed to the 24 months of the post-study. In order to be approved on the graduate skilled visa, you must be on the PR list. Unfortunately, it's no longer the skilled occupation list, but it's still there is a PR list specifically if you want to apply for the 18-month visa. And basically, your application must include a skills assessment. Now, this is for the 18-month visa that you need a skills assessment. As I mentioned, there's a few things that you need for the 18-month visa that are additional to that you need for the 2-year visa. And of course, it's for students who applied for their first student visa before 5th of November 2011, so that doesn't cover any of you. Okay, so next up is the permanent residency application. So if you guys have studied a course that's on the PR list, or you have completed a course that's not even on the PR list, but it's on a certain state sponsorship list, you may be able to apply for one of these subclasses. So 189 is the independent permanent residency based on points, general skilled migration. 190 is a state sponsorship application where you may be able to apply for permanent residency if you make a certain amount of points and if the occupation that you're applying for is being sponsored by a certain state at that point. And the 489, which is also a relative or state-sponsored visa, also based on skills. You must have a skills assessment for your occupation, but depending on which stream you go with, it can lead to PR. Although it's a temporary visa to begin with, it allows you a pathway to PR if you complete all of the obligations and requirements that you need to meet in those 4 years. Now, normally, an applicant will be eligible for permanent residency independently or with the state or relative sponsorships. You must make a minimum of 60 points. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware that the points table requires a minimum of 60 points for you to even be eligible to apply for an expression of interest. However, lately you must have heard rumors where you need more than 60 points, so you need to get a higher IELTS score. So 60 points is the eligibility criteria. Once you hit 60, you're able to apply for an expression of interest. However, because this is mainly based on points and, the higher the points, the more your chances of getting an invitation. If you have more than 60 points based on IELTS, work experience, studying in a regional area, so on and so forth, you may have a better chance at getting an invitation quicker. Now, to those who have not studied something that's on the PR list, and to those who have studied something on the PR list, but for whatever reason make just under 60 points, what can you do? So the other options are to apply for a subclass 190 if your occupation is on a state list. So making 55 points and having an occupation on the state list, the state has the opportunity to give you an extra 5 points, bringing you to the minimum 60, and if they do endorse you, then you can apply for a visa under that. The 190 is also a permanent residency visa. The only thing is that if you do get your PR based on subclass 190 sponsored by a state, you need to then live in that state for 2 years after you get your PR. That's basically the obligation that you have. Now, the next one that we'd like to talk about is 489. So, after the independent PR of 189, the state-sponsored PR of 190, 489 has two different streams, as I mentioned before. Now, the two streams are relative and regional sponsored. Now, normally, if the state is sponsoring someone on a 489, it would be in a regional area. It won't be in a metro area. So, both similarities between both these different streams is that you get a 4-year visa, and you need to normally live for 2 years in a designated area in Australia, and you need to work full-time for 1 year. And when you've completed these obligations or requirements, you're then able to apply for your permanent residency moving forwards. But the difference between the two subclasses, two streams, is that the regional sponsored one requires you to have your occupation listed on the 489 list of a certain state. I'll give you an example. If you have studied IT, for example, and you want to apply for 489 in, say, Queensland, let's just say, for example's sake, Queensland must have, and your IT profession, for example, if you're an ICT business analyst or a developer programmer, whatever it is that you've studied, on their 489 list for you to be able to apply. And normally, if you do get a regional state-sponsored 489, once you've been granted the visa, you will have to move to the designated area that you're supposed to live in, live there for 2 years, and within those 2 years prove that you've had 1 year of full-time employment, and then you can apply for your permanent residency after that. However, if you're trying to go for the relative sponsored side of things, because you might have a close relative that lives in Australia and is a permanent resident or a citizen, in that case, your application can only be processed if your occupation is on the PR list. So the relative sponsored one is to help potential applicants who have occupations or qualifications on the PR list but don't make enough points, and they have relatives who live in designated areas. The list of designated areas, I must also let you know, is bigger than regional areas. So they're not the same as regional Australia. So there might be some designated areas very close to Brisbane that they could live in, and they might not be regional. However, there might be certain areas that are regional and designated. So we can discuss these things. For example, if you believe that you are eligible and you have a relative that lives in a designated or a regional area, we can look at these things and let you know whether you're eligible for that one or not. So that's the 489 state-sponsored and relative-sponsored visa. And moving forward, now we've got the employer sponsorship. So we've just covered student visa, temporary residency, and permanent residency for those who have completed their qualifications based on skill and points. Now, the next one would be employer sponsorship, and the first visa that we will discuss is the 457 visa. Now, before we start with the 457, a lot of things have changed and is due to change with the 457. So, as of now, the 457 visa, as we know it, will continue until March of next year, when it will be replaced by a different visa, which they're calling the TSS visa, which is a temporary short-skilled visa, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the right thing? Temporary short skills. It will be coming in next year in March, but until then we still have the 457 visa that's going. In order to get a 457, you need to normally have a full-time job offer, potentially for 2 years or more, along with a salary requirement of $54,000 plus superannuation. This is the threshold salary. Now, depending on what kind of job you have, you may have to be paid more. For example, if you're an accountant and the market rate salary of an accountant is way higher than that amount, then you have to be paid what the market rate salary is, but nothing less than $54,000 plus superannuation will be able to suffice the requirement. The IELTS requirement is slightly lower for this one. It's 5 overall with nothing less than 4.5 in each of your modules. This is to get a 457 visa. It's a 3-step process as well, which is the company approval, then the nomination that the company needs someone in that position, and then of course the visa application for the person that's applying the visa. Okay, so this one is the employer sponsorship pathway for PR. So if you're on a 457 and you are already or basically you had your visa before April 19, 2017, which was just last month, you are able to apply for PR under the old rules, which required you to work with your employer for 24 months. And if you work with them for 24 months on the 457 and a lot of the other requirements are met, you will be able to apply for PR. Now this is only for people who had their 457 already when the changes were introduced last month on the 19th of April. So if you guys are all on your student visa, you guys will be looking to apply for the new 457, so that would be under the new rules. And we'll discuss the changes very shortly. The second employer sponsorship visa that we will be discussing is the RSMS visa. Now this is the Regional Skilled Migration Scheme, and it allows applicants to apply for permanent residency if you have a job in regional Australia and your employer wants to sponsor you to work for them. And it gives you PR straight away, as in when you get granted the visa, you will be a permanent resident, but the obligation you then have is to work for your employer for 2 years post that date in order to meet the RSMS requirement. Now this one is mainly for businesses, like I said, in a designated regional area in Australia, and in order to apply for this visa, the applicant or the employee will need to demonstrate an English score of 6 in each of the IELTS modules. And relevant qualifications will also be required. There is also an option of work experience to be used, but there's various different things that we need to look at when you're applying for a visa based simply on work experience. However, basically, whatever job you're getting, you must have qualifications or at least work experience towards that role. So if you have studied a MBA and you're being sponsored in a position related to business or marketing or something along those lines, that would obviously make sense. If you are an IT student and you're being sponsored to work in the IT field in a company that requires that position, that would make sense. So that's how they normally would work that one. This is, like I said, a permanent residency visa. And as of today, the applications for RSMS remain the same. There may be some changes in July and major changes coming in March of next year. But until then, most occupations are able to apply for RSMS, provided that your education and your work experience does support your application, and the employer obviously is running a business that meets all of the requirements. There will be some changes to RSMS in March 2018 that we are aware of. However, there are some changes that are coming in that we're not aware of, so we won't sort of get into that just as yet. But what we can tell you now is that the occupation list for RSMS will be reduced. So there'll be a smaller list. Not every occupation that can be sponsored today may be able to get sponsored in March of next year. So anyone wanting to apply for this probably should, under the current rules, should try and do it before March 2018. The ENS direct entry, so this is the exact same visa that you would normally lodge after being on 457 for 2 years and applying for your permanent residency. But there's 2 ways of applying for this. One is, of course, being on 457 for 2 years. But for certain applicants, for example, if you have worked in the past and have a lot of work experience, there is a possibility that the employer may be able to sponsor you for PR straight away without having you go through the 2 years of 457. So I'll give you an example. If someone was working back home, and the work experience does not need to be in Australia, say you did a Bachelor's of Business back home and you worked for a period of 5 years before you decided to come here and study your Master's, and you worked as a marketing and sales specialist or a technical sales representative. Now, if you do find a job here and the employer says that they're happy to sponsor you and go ahead and look at your options, you might have the option of applying for permanent residency straight away without having to go through 2 years of 457. But in order to do that, in order to be able to apply for this jump the queue, so to speak, and straight away apply for the direct entry, you will need a skills assessment for those 3 years of work experience that you claim. So because your work experience may be in Australia, may not be in Australia, wherever it is in the world, there is skills assessment bodies, and this is not the Department of Immigration, but skills assessment bodies appointed and required to get skills assessment from them in order to apply for visas, that will assess whether you have 3 years of work experience. If you get a positive assessment and you have 6 each, which is higher than the normal 457 requirement, any business that wants to sponsor you and meets their side of the requirements can apply for PR straight away instead of putting you through the 457. So this is mainly for people that have worked a few years back home before coming here, and that kind of helps you, the work experience you have kind of helps you to then maybe even find a job easily, but also then get your PR a lot quicker and not have to go through the temporary transition stream of the 457. All right, so now this is the big one. So this does apply to a lot of, I suppose, all of you if you guys are on a student visa and want to apply for 457. This is the changes that came in last month. Now, over 200 occupations were removed from the 457 list. So the list was very, very big, and now they've sort of knocked off a lot of these different occupations that were on there, and they've reduced the list, and they've actually introduced 2 new lists. The lists are called STSOL list and the MLTSSL list. That's the short-term skilled occupation list and the medium and long-term skilled occupation list. I think SSL, something along those lines. They're new, I'm still getting used to them too. The STSOL list though is basically a smaller list, and you can still apply for 457 for the occupations on this list, but anything that's on the STSOL list will only give you a visa for 2 years. And that particular visa can then be extended for an additional 2 years, so it's a total of 4 years. However, any occupation on the STSOL list will not have a PR pathway. So it's essentially just a short-term work visa, which can be extended once. However, you will not have any PR occupations. Then there's the MLTSSL list, which is the medium and long-term list of occupations. And these occupations can get PR if you're sponsored in any of the occupations on that list for 457. But as opposed to before, where you only had to work with your employer for 2 years in order to get your PR, in this situation, you will need to work with your employer for a period of 3 years before you get sponsored for your permanent residency. So there's an extra 1 year there, and you will also require to get 6 each. Now in the past, if you're on a 457, you finish 2 years of employment, you only needed to show an English requirement of 5 each in IELTS, or the equivalent in a different test. In this situation, from now on, anyone that does complete their 3 years and is on the MLTSSL list will need 6 each instead of 5 each to lodge their PR. Also, a certain change that I would like to mention in this situation is that if you're on a 457 now, and you will be completing your 2 years after July, and this might apply to friends or family that you might know, you will need to have 6 each or demonstrate the English language requirement of 6 each to lodge your PR after 2 years, if you're lodging after 1st of July 2017, which is after the next coming month. So everyone will need 6 each essentially to lodge PR, irrespective of being on a 457 for 2 years or not. Okay. All right, so those are the main visa subclasses and the requirements that we currently have to abide by. And we just also wanted to make sure that you know that we are in the city, but we also, apart from migration, offer other legal services such as conveyance, family law, and civil matters. So, you know, if you're buying a house, if someone requires a solicitor to buy a house, sell a house, or is having any issues with, you know, their divorce or anything like that, they can contact us and our solicitors will be able to help them. So basically that's the end of our presentation in terms of information, but I'm sure you guys might have a lot of questions. So if you guys have written your questions down, Russell and Surya will be conducting a question and answer session now. So please feel free to, you know, just put your hand up and we'll select who it is that asks the questions. And Russell, who's our senior solicitor and registered migration agent, will be able to answer all your questions for you, or as many as we can today. Before I conclude, I also want to tell you about the special that we have for JCUB students. So normally, if you do come to us for the TR, Our normal price is $1,000 to apply for your post-study work visa. However, if you are coming in from JCUB, you will basically be able to get this at half price, which is $500. And for permanent residency, our normal
Pode avisar o meu caso.
Do we have any IT students here?
Sorry?
Just wondering, so who are first year students who just started their course?
If a person has an experience and he's doing bachelor's, when he want to apply for permanent residency, then the points will be added for that.
Possibly. It all depends on what you're applying for under your permanent residency.
If I think so, 189.
So it depends on the occupation that you're applying for. It also depends on what you studied previously, and then also what you're studying now. So most of the time, work experience points is based on post-qualification. So it's based on, you've already got the skill because you've got the qualification, and then now you've got the work experience. So points can only be added if you've got that experience post-qualification. But sometimes your previous qualification can count towards meeting that pre-qualification requirement. So that if you're working now in Australia while you're studying, perhaps that work experience can count. So it depends. But I'm just wondering, before I start my Q&A, who here has just started their university life here at JCU? So most of you? Who is in their final year? And are most of you business students or IT? Hospitality? Okay, so you've got a variety of different students. So what about, let's say, hospitality? Who's doing the tourism and hospitality? What about information technology? Okay, there's a few of you. And business courses? Like accounting, for example?
Accounting.
Okay. So when you came to Australia, did you first think, I want to get permanent residency? Was that the reason you came?
No.
Or was it, you want to try and get a good education? Because one thing is constant in Australia. I've been here for more than 10 years now. When I first came here, my parents spent a lot of money on my education. I could buy a small house back in Malaysia with the money that they spent. But one thing threw me into a twist, into a bind. Just before I graduated, the occupation of law was removed from the list entirely. So if I graduated at that time, I wouldn't have been able to apply for permanent residency. Then I thought, what should I do? Because I came here, I thought, let's get a good education. My parents wanted me to maybe go back home, maybe get a few years experience here. But I also thought, one thing, the reason why I came to Australia was I discovered Australia is a great country. It's a beautiful country. The education system is one of the best out of places that I've looked at. And also the people. They're friendly, they're inviting. So I decided I wanted to stay. But with that decision, I thought, what can I do? But I thought, knuckle down, study hard, finish your course, we'll see what happens. Changes happen all the time to the migration rules. But I know that within me, I can finish my course, and we'll see what we can do after that. So once I finished, I was able to apply for the 485, but I wasn't able to apply for the PR. Then I waited a while, and then luckily the rules changed about a year into my 485. So the thing that you have to remember is whatever you're doing, even if your occupation is not on the permanent residency list, there's different options that you can look at. Okay? So, sorry, that's just my personal.
Yeah, just don't lose heart. Complete your studies, and it will take you to permanent residency someday. But yes, there would be different arenas to look forward for. Just not 189 is not the end of life. What we want to say. So you're in a very good university. Opportunities come. You have to capitalize on your opportunities. I was an ex-student of JCU. I did my internship over here 8 years back through JCU, and I've been with my firm for the last 8 years. So yeah. So it's very important for you to concentrate on your studies and complete them in time.
So let's throw some questions our way. Do you have any questions at all specific?
So, for example, I'm gonna finish my studies on November.
Yes, what are you studying?
Accounting. And then in between November and March next year, that's when my visa expires, the student visa,
Yes.
do I have to apply for another visa during that time, or
So-
should I wait until March next year to apply for the 485 or whatever
So
comes
you came
next?
to Australia on that visa and you've never changed your
Never,
course?
yeah, it was
Right.
granted until March next year.
Oh,
But I was supposed to finish on November, and I'm gonna finish on November.
Yes.
So there is
you
this
have 4
six,
months
yeah,
before your
4 to
visa
6
expires.
months, yeah.
Yes. So under immigration policy, if you came to Australia on a specific visa that they gave you because of the study that you enrolled in before you came to Australia, then you can remain in Australia after your studies finish. Even if, let's say, you fast-tracked your studies and you finished in July, you can still stay in Australia until the end of your visa.
Okay.
So you can still stay in Australia until March and apply for your 485.
And same
4
rules,
months.
same rules apply during that time? So the same rules as I won't be studying, but I'm
Yes.
still under
You won't be
student
studying
visa.
Because you've completed your study,
So-
you can work full-time.
So I can work full time during those period,
Yes,
during that
after you
period.
finish your study. So from November or December until March, you can work full-time
'Cause
because
that-
you've completed your studies.
Okay. Yeah. And then I can apply for the next one just
Yes.
before that one expires.
Mhm. That's right.
My case is similar.
What's your name?
Kat. Okay, so my case is similar, but my visa is valid until May of next year.
That's it.
I'm supposed to finish March next year, but I was able to complete it earlier, so I'll be finishing in November this year. So,
Sure. So you have your visa until May next
May
year.
next year. So, is my stay here in Australia still within until
As
May?
long as, yes, correct. Yeah,
And
as long as you
wouldn't it
finish
be
the
covered
course.
under early completion matters because I've searched some, information
That
over the
applies
net that there
to this
I will be allowed to stay here for like 28 days after I completed the course because it will fall under early completion criteria. So I'm really confused.
So where did you read this about?
I just searched some of some
And you probably read something on forums or,
yes.
yes.
And then I heard
Yeah,
some
exactly.
information.
So there's lots of information out there.
Yes.
Some information is correct, some information is wrong, some information is just people's opinion. But
Yeah.
basically, if you came to Australia, say you applied for the JCU Masters, MITHM, for example,
MBA.
or MBA. Let's say you came to Australia with the JCU COE for MBA. So let's say, or let's say MBA and MIT. So that's a 2-year course?
2 years.
So let's say you finish that in 16 months, you finish that in 1.5 years, but that COE would expire in May, but then you finished it in, say, November. That's fine. You can still continue to have that visa until May because you've completed the course that you had a COE for, but you've completed it early. Maybe you fast tracked, maybe you did some extra credits, or you had a summer semester, that sort of thing. But yes, as long as you finish that COE that you were given and that visa never changed, you can complete early and then have that visa for the remainder of the period.
Okay, and then wait until May and then apply for it.
Yes. Of course, it's never good to leave it to the last minute, so probably you should apply, a couple of months or a month before.
Should we apply for bridging visa?
Oh, bridging visa is part of the process that you apply for the visa.
So you need not apply for it separately. There are certain deadlines that you have to concentrate once you finish off your.
But there are
course.
deadlines, that's what you have to
So
remember.
it's always good to consult us.
Exactly.
From a staff perspective though, if a student had completed study and was not enrolled, I can imagine the process might not be as you've just
So
explained.
some universities might report them to the department saying that
That's correct.
they've completed their studies, which is fine. The COE shows that they've completed the studies
Yeah.
as well. So the department.
I think
technically
that's
is
where the
informed.
confusion
Yes,
was.
yeah, definitely. So yes, they've completed their studies, and some universities have the policy that they will inform the department, but the department won't cancel their visa under the internal policy.
Yeah. So I would suggest to those students asking those questions that you should talk to the staff here as well and let them know what you are wanting to do, and then obviously they will ensure they say the right things or do the right things for you. Does that make sense?
Like they have explained on the slide that it's 92 weeks of study should be there. 92
Yes,
weeks.
so if you're applying for the graduate visa, or the 485, the post-study work visa, you have to have done at least 92, or your COE must be for a course that is at least
It's
92
about
weeks.
COE or it should be like studies. That's the confusion.
Your study must be over 16 months, but the actual COE must show a 92-week course.
Or if it is more than that, like do a
And most
fast
of the
track.
courses here, sorry, are
Most of the
registered for.
courses.
I'll just come in between and I'll mention, see what, your question is about the COE. Now, when you've got a COE for a particular course, now courses are registered with the government with a particular code. Now, those codes are either for 12 months or 16 months. If your course, the course that you're studying here is registered for 16 months, that makes you eligible for that particular visa. But if your course is registered under 12 subject, which is less than 1.5 year, obviously you won't be eligible. Please correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
so there is
Yeah.
a page which shows the
I'm
registration
not
of
saying
your
about that
COE.
thing.
I'm
coming
going
on
to
the
come back
point.
to that as well.
No, registered, it's okay.
Yes.
If we do a fast track, means like people do fast track. They start, they have a courses for 2 years. They finish it in less than 16 months. Then what
Unless
happens?
you can't finish it in this.
Because it
No,
has to
because
be
take
minimum
5 subjects.
studies of
Many people do it.
92
5
weeks.
subjects they took it and they can do it.
So
Then what we say about that?
Sure, so basically your actual study.
It's
your-
2 years,
your
but
physical-
finishing before 16 months.
Yes.
Then
So, no,
study over.
I'll try and clarify. So if you started in January, okay, and then you're supposed to finish by November. So if you started in January 2016, you're supposed to finish by November 2017. That's 2 years actually, so 2016, 2017. But you fast track your course, maybe you take on a little bit more subjects, whatever it might be, but you finish in July
Yeah.
2017. If the period is in calendar months 16 months, then that's okay. So 1 year is 12 months, and the next one from January to July is 7 months, so that would be 19 months. That's okay. That's calendar months. The actual calendar months of study must be 16 months. Your COE must be a course for 92 weeks. That's
Got
what
it.
is. Yeah.
So I have like when you do the skills assessment, right?
Yes.
I don't think so. I have when you do the skills assessment, I heard that they give 2 years of what you've done, like my country, and then they give you how much you've actually done.
So what did you study? What did you study? Sorry.
So I'm studying at MIT at the moment.
Okay, great.
I've done my bachelor's in electrical engineering,
Uh-huh.
and but I did my work experience in 8.5 years in IT.
Okay. After you finish your engineering
After
degree?
I finished my engineering in engineering, triply, I did 3.5 years of IT, and now I'm doing my master's.
Sure. Okay. So what was your question again? I'm sorry.
So doing your skills assessment, when you do your skills assessment, I heard something that they remove 2 years, 2 years,
All
something
right.
like a year and a
Yes.
half.
Certain skills assessment bodies do remove. So some skills assessment says you need to have 1 year to meet the requirements. And what they do is they remove 1 year towards your points requirement. So let's say if you have 3 years experience, they'll remove 1 year because 1 year is their requirement. So technically you only have 2 years. Some of them require 2 years. For example, in IT, they require 2 years. So if you have 3 years, they'll remove 2 years of that to meet their requirements. So then you only have 1 year that they can count towards points.
So what does that mean? Do I get a year and a half years worth of experience on my, when I'm applying for my skills assessment, do it's 1.6 or?
Yeah. Your inquiry is quite specific. I would suggest, if you have time to come to our office, maybe bring your resume. We can have a chat about what you're studying now. We can have a chat to you about how you can, meet your end goal, or look at what you're hoping for, and we can talk to you about whether you'd be able to meet the requirements or not.
He had a question.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
I'll be finishing my accounting degree next month.
Great.
Could you please clarify that? Is it compulsory to do a professional year to get a skills assessment for accounting?
For accounting, it might not be. So if you have a certain English, if you have done an English exam, whether it's IELTS or PTE, if you meet a certain score, at the moment it's 7 each in IELTS, it needs to be academic. If you meet that score, then you might not need professional year. But sometimes people do professional year because they see the advantage of getting that professional teaching, and also the internship, and also the advantage of getting 5 extra points. So sometimes people do that to boost their points.
Yeah, after finishing my studies, as per my calculations, I'll be at 70 points.
Yes.
And after doing a professional year and NATI course, which will take another 10 to 11 months, I'll be at 80 points.
Oh, great.
So in this type of situation, what would you suggest? Go for an application at 70 points, so increase the points to 80 and then apply.
Possibly. I would suggest that
We have
you
to actually
make
see how we reach 70 points.
you make sure that you do reach 70 points, because if you think you reach 70 points but you may not, and you claim that 70 points, it could be a problem when you apply for your visa. So I would suggest, if you, because our first consultation is free, come and see us. We can go through a points assessment with you and then let you know whether there's any issues or not.
Yeah, thanks.
So I know there's a proper point, like, because the course gets more said, is my course, in 2019. And there's a period of around 2 months.
Yes?
I want to know that how long it will take for me for anyone to apply.
Can I have one?
So it takes like 2 months to the date, like someone trying to applying for the PR, but I get it like next 2 months, or it takes more time. Because I want like exactly plan out what I'm like apply for PR and then PR file is apply for the
Oh, okay. With permanent residency, it's very hard to predict. The reason is because it's called expression of interest. It means you apply and express your interest, but it doesn't mean they'll invite you. It all depends on their system of how high your points are, what work experience you have. You only know once you get invited the time frame. If you've been invited and you actually apply for the visa, it usually takes about 3 months to process. But getting that invitation, that part is, you're not sure when you get the invitation. It all depends on a lot of different factors.
do something or like something in between.
It's very hard to give you a time frame. It all depends on your points. It all depends on your work experience, your occupation. There's no, it's not a specific thing. Like applying for a student visa usually takes about a month or 2 months. For permanent residency, it's not that.
Okay, since you said that, then I have another question for you. Do you have bridging visa for internship?
If you actually applied for the visa, yes, but if you haven't applied for the visa, you're just putting in an expression of interest, then no.
Some of us, we are MIT MBA students, so we are still in our first semester.
Yes.
And we've heard all sorts of things that MIT MBA students are not eligible for a PR. So can you please clarify if we are really eligible for a PR, or do we need to change our stream into MIT? According to the ACS.
Yes. So at the moment, MIT or IT occupations are on the permanent residency list. You've got MIT MBA, meaning that you do some business subjects, but the majority is probably IT, right? So when you finish your course, what happens is you have to apply for something called a skills assessment, and they look at the subjects that you've done based on whatever you've done. Is it bachelor's that you're doing or your master's? Okay, sure. So with your master's course, as long as the Australian Computer Society, the people who are doing the skills assessment, will look at whether you did a 2-year degree in Australia or not. Then they'll also look at whether you meet the requirements for the skills assessment. In your case, at the moment, normally you need at least 1 year work experience after you finish your degree, or you can do a professional year course. That's the current rules. So let's say you decided to do a professional year and maybe look for a job in the meantime. Once you finish your professional year, you also do an internship. But what they'll look at is, did you do a professional year? How many subjects did you do in IT? And also, what's the overall number of years you studied in Australia? Depending on what stream of IT subject did you do, or maybe you did more business subjects, your skills assessment can come out differently. So you probably will be able to meet the requirements for a skills assessment, but what you get for your skills assessment might be different, because there's skills assessment for application developers, developer programmers, there will be ones for business analysts, ICT business analysts. So what subjects you do will determine that. So in all likelihood, I haven't seen what you actually study, but in all likelihood, doing an MIT MBA, and we've gone through many students who have done that, will get you, yes, from JCU as well, will get you a skills assessment for an IT occupation, which is on the PR list, but it might not, it could depend on which one. There's 5, 6 different IT occupations. The ones that you based on the subject that you're doing, might be in a different one than what you were hoping for. So there's 5 different ones. You have to look at the subjects that you do before we can tell you which one you might fall into. But most students that we've gone through MIT MBA have no problems getting a skills assessment.
I have one question. Can you just confirm if you do end up extending your degree? I'm doing MIT MBA, but if you do end up doing like supposed to finish in 16 months and I do it like in 18 or 20, in that case, do you still qualify for the permanent residency, or you just don't?
So you mean if you did
If you failed.
Yeah, if you do end up
I
extending
see.
your study.
If you failed a couple of subjects, you needed to extend your student visa?
Yeah.
Yes, that's not a problem at all.
As long, that's the minimum criteria. 16 months is the minimum criteria.
Okay, so
Yeah, you can do more. You can do 32 months.
So you have to apply for another visa then, or you just?
Before you finish your, if your student visa is about to expire,
Yeah.
and you still have more studies to do, say let's say another semester, because maybe you fail 1 or 2 subjects, you have to do that subject in the next semester, but your visa is running out, yes, you must apply for another student visa.
How long before you have to apply for?
You have to apply before your visa expires, but always plan a month or 2 months in advance. Never leave it to the last minute. The reason is because there's rules changes, there's sometimes things that you have to do, you might have to apply for something, and then like a police clearance, but sometimes it's hard to get that police clearance, so always plan a month or 2 in advance.
Yeah, just last question. And do you have, my IELTS has expired a year and a half ago, so do I have to still take another IELTS exam?
Yes, you might. It depends on when you took it. So expiry dates,
That's about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So it might be expired for a student visa. You probably should take another exam.